I wasn't supposed to be there. The corporate event in Denver was meant for senior leadership and their partners, a weekend mixer with glossy name tags, hotel lanyards, and little networking stations that smelled like ambition and white wine. My wife Kelly had RSVP'd weeks in advance. She had earned her spot being part of the operations team for nearly 5 years. I, on the other hand, had only just been appointed regional director, and my official onboarding tour wasn't scheduled until next quarter. So I wasn't on the guest list. No one expected me, least of all her. I flew in that afternoon, checked into a different hotel, and arrived late enough to miss the speeches but early enough to catch dessert. I wasn't stalking her, if that's what you're thinking. I didn't sneak around in the shadows or wear sunglasses indoors. I walked in through the back entrance of the ballroom like any other guest. Badge clipped on. Drink in hand. Blending in. I just wanted to see her. Or maybe I needed to see something. And I did. She was standing near the bar in a black satin dress I hadn't seen before. Not the usual Kelly workwear, tailored and safe, but something sleeker. Something deliberate. Her hair was pinned up, neck bare except for the gold chain I'd bought her 3 anniversaries ago. She looked beautiful. But it was her eyes that got me. They weren't looking around the room. They were locked in on a man, mid-20s, maybe, with that fresh from grad school shine. His body was angled toward her. And hers mirrored his. Not in a formal posture kind of way. In a familiar way. Too familiar. She was laughing. I watched her reach out and brush something lint, a joke maybe, off his shoulder. Her fingers lingered longer than they should have. You know that feeling when your stomach drops before your brain catches up? That was me. Frozen halfway between stepping forward and turning around. She didn't notice me at first. I was just another suit in a sea of name badges and hotel lighting. But then she did. Her eyes locked onto mine from across the room. There wasn't panic in her face. No shock. No guilt. Just a split-second freeze, and then she pivoted. Smoothly. Casually. As if she had rehearsed it. She raised her champagne flute and called out, voice perfectly cheerful, "Logan. There you are." People turned. A few smiled, then recognized me, maybe from the internal newsletter or company website. I heard a chuckle nearby. Kelly lifted her glass higher and added, "To my husband, who somehow manages to show up even when he's technically not on the guest list. Cheers to surprise audits and unexpected arrivals." Laughter rippled across the room. Someone clapped. I offered a tight smile. The moment was funny on the surface. But it was also strategic. I knew her well enough to see the move for what it was. A redirection. A sleight of hand. And I wasn't the only one who noticed. The younger guy beside her, the one with the suit that looked just slightly too new, glanced between us like he was suddenly caught in a scene he hadn't auditioned for. He laughed too, a little too late, and took a large gulp of his drink. His smile didn't reach his eyes. She kissed me on the cheek as I approached. Not the lips. Not even a slow lean. A quick peck that barely touched skin. "Didn't expect to see you here," she whispered through her teeth, all sugar on the outside. I shrugged. Didn't want to miss the party. She turned and introduced me to the guy. "This is Devin. He's one of our data analysts from the Boulder office." Devin shook my hand. Firm grip, but his eyes darted sideways. "Nice to meet you, sir." I hated the way he said it. Like I was someone to fear. Or someone to avoid. "Nice to meet you too," I replied, holding the handshake a second longer than I needed to. Kelly laughed again, louder this time, as if overcompensating, and offered another toast to the room, this one more generic. To surprises and to surviving another quarter. Glasses clinked. People turned back to their conversations. But I wasn't clinking glasses. I was watching her. I noticed how she put a few inches of distance between herself and Devin after that. How her left hand, which used to wear her wedding ring, was curled around her glass, bare. And I noticed how her right hand, the one closest to him, stayed unnaturally still, like it was resisting muscle memory. The whole thing was off. I couldn't explain it in words, not then, but it felt like walking into a room just after a secret had been told. Everyone smiling too hard. The tension subtle but thick. We made small talk for the next half hour, mingled with people I barely remembered from last year's budget summit. Kelly acted perfectly normal. Maybe too normal. She complimented a woman's necklace. Told a story about an office printer mishap. But her smile, God, her smile was surgical. It never reached her eyes. The rest of the night blurred. I stayed longer than I should have, mostly to watch her. Not to catch her doing something obvious, but to see her. To study what had changed. The way she walked away from Devin without saying goodbye. The quick texts she sent under the table when she thought no one was watching. The way she introduced me to people who didn't seem to know she was married. I left the ballroom around 11. Walked back to my hotel in silence, passing neon signs and couples holding hands. I didn't call her. Didn't ask where she went after I left. Because the truth was already in front of me. It was there in the way she touched his shoulder. The way she turned that moment into a joke, wrapped it in champagne and charm. The way her eyes shifted, not because she was caught, but because she was calculating what I'd seen. And I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit for a long time. I had stopped knowing who she really was. Or maybe I just stopped being the version of me that she cared about. The night after the event, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling of that sterile hotel room, hearing the hum of the air conditioning and replaying Kelly's laughter in my head on a loop, each note of it slightly wrong, like a song played in the wrong key. That little toast she gave, the way she locked eyes with me mid-sentence, how quickly she repositioned herself from guilty to charming, it was all so orchestrated. Too smooth to be spontaneous. That moment didn't just crack something open. It lit a fuse. When I got home the next day, I sat at the kitchen table with a mug of black coffee and started pulling mental thread after thread, all the little things I'd brushed off over the last few months. On their own, they'd seemed harmless. But now, they were forming a pattern I couldn't ignore. Like the new Friday evening workout classes. She'd started them about 2 months ago. Bar or yoga or something downtown, she said. She'd come back flushed and glowing, always with a smoothie in hand and some excuse about the class running long. I remembered how I used to ask how the workout went and she'd just smile and say, tiring but good. No detail. Just that same phrase over and over. Tiring but good. And then there were the phone calls. She'd stopped answering around me. Her ringtone would go off and she'd silence it with a thumb swipe and I'll call them back later. Sometimes she'd excuse herself to take it in the backyard or in her car. Once when I asked who it was, she said just work stuff without even looking up. But just work stuff was becoming a little too common. Then there was her car. About 3 weeks ago, I borrowed her keys because I couldn't find mine. I was running late, didn't think anything of it. But when I slid into the driver's seat, the smell hit me. Cologne. Not perfume. And definitely not mine. A sharper scent, woodsy, synthetic. Something younger. At the time I convinced myself it was probably a coworker who carpooled with her. Yeah? I couldn't pretend. And the wedding ring. She wasn't wearing it as often. At first it was during workouts, which made sense. Then she stopped wearing it to work too. When I asked once, she said she was getting it resized, but it returned days later without mention and she still left it in the jewelry dish by the sink most mornings. It was like watching a slow fade, one ritual at a time. And the photos. That might have been the biggest tell. She had started posting more selfies on social media, more group sh*TS at work outings or coffee dates, more candid happy hour with the girls kinds of posts. But I wasn't in them. Not once. We used to take photos at restaurants, parks, even lazy Sunday brunches at home. Now I was invisible. If someone judged her marriage based on her profile, they'd think she was single. It didn't stop there. The silences grew louder. She was always distracted, always exhausted, always closing her laptop the second I walked into the room. I'd ask how her day went and get a vague fine, or it was a lot. Her answers were rehearsed, generic. She had a way of ending conversations quickly without being abrupt, something I hadn't even noticed until recently. Every word carefully chosen. Every emotion kept just out of reach. It all clicked into place the night I found the tablet. It was old, one of those hand-me-down devices we hadn't used in years. I was digging through the closet looking for a pair of headphones when I found it tucked between some books. Out of curiosity, I charged it. When it powered on, I realized it was still linked to her cloud storage account. I almost didn't open it. But curiosity? It's like gravity. There were old photos, old documents, reminders, saved passwords, but what stood out were the travel confirmations. There were at least 3 separate hotel reservations from the past 4 months. All in Colorado. None of them I knew about. The names on the reservations were vague, and the email confirmations didn't show both guests, just her. The weekends matched the times she'd said she was working a conference or training session. I kept scrolling and found a folder labeled Notes. Inside were draft letters unsent, unedited. Some were only a few lines. Others ran several paragraphs. All of them shared the same theme, detachment. Regret. Distance. Like she was writing breakup letters to me but never had the nerve to send them. One stuck with me. It read, "You've been good to me and I hate that this is the only way I feel anything lately. I know you'll be hurt and I know you don't deserve it. But I can't keep pretending I'm present when I'm already gone." There was no recipient named. But I knew who it was meant for. I sat there in our guest room, the tablet on my lap, and just stared at the screen. There was no confrontation. No explosion. Just a slow sinking in my chest. This wasn't a one-time slip. This wasn't an emotional low she was trying to climb out of. This was a blueprint. Something organized, deliberate. It had been happening right under my nose. I started noticing smaller things after that. The locked folder on her phone she'd never had before. The accidental FaceTime calls that disconnected the moment I answered. The new gym bag with men's deodorant inside, stuff she claimed a coworker left behind. Little crumbs of carelessness. It all formed a mosaic. One I didn't want to admit was real even as I stood there staring straight at it. What hurt more than anything wasn't just that she might be cheating. It was that she had planned for it. That she had constructed a new emotional world without me in it and had the clarity to save drafts explaining why she felt justified. There was no more pretending. This wasn't a midlife crisis or a misunderstanding. It wasn't something we could laugh about in 10 years or fix with therapy. This was a woman already living a double life, only pausing long enough to keep up appearances until the moment she didn't have to. And I had finally stopped being blind enough to miss it. 2 days after the Denver event, Kelly said she needed to go to Boulder. It was supposedly for a strategy meeting with a vendor team. She made it sound routine, dry, forgettable. I was at the kitchen table when she mentioned it, scrolling through work emails, trying to act like I hadn't spent the night before reading every draft letter and hotel itinerary I'd found on her old tablet. She said it with ease. No nervousness. No extra sugar in her voice. And that's what made it worse. She'd crossed some invisible line. The part where she used to feel guilty if she ever did was long gone. Just overnight, she said, stuffing her laptop into her bag. I'll be back tomorrow evening. I nodded, barely looking up. Sounds good. Safe drive. She kissed me on the cheek and left. I watched her walk out the door, heels clicking, coat folded neatly over her arm. Like any other Tuesday. But this time I didn't sit still. I waited 20 minutes after she left. Just long enough to be sure she was gone for real. Then I followed her. It felt ridiculous at first, like I was some amateur private investigator with no plan. But I knew Boulder well. Knew the hotels, the neighborhoods. And I had something better than luck. Her car's Bluetooth history and the locations she'd favorited on Google Maps. She wasn't hiding them. Maybe because she didn't think I'd ever look. Maybe because she stopped caring if I did. By the time I arrived, it was already dusk. I parked down the street from the address, an ordinary suburban home in a quiet neighborhood with trimmed hedges and tidy porches. Not a hotel. Not a business suite. A house. Her car was parked right out front. led the engine and sat in my truck for almost an hour. Lights were on inside. Nothing looked out of place. Just a warm, lived-in glow coming from the second-floor windows. I rolled the window down a few inches and listened. Nothing but the occasional bark of a dog a few houses down and the low hum of a distant lawnmower. Eventually, I stepped out and walked closer, sticking to the sidewalk, pretending to be out for a casual stroll. There was a narrow gap in the curtains on the second floor. That's when I saw her. She crossed the room wearing nothing but a soft gray robe, one I didn't recognize. Her hair was damp, like she just showered, and she moved slowly, casually. At ease. She opened a drawer, pulled something out, and disappeared from view. Not 30 seconds later, he appeared. The guy from the Denver event. Devin. He walked shirtless into the frame, laughing at something I couldn't hear. And then he reached out and gently touched her face. She leaned into it. My stomach dropped. There was no room left for speculation. I didn't need a confrontation or a confession. I was standing outside a stranger's house in a city she said she was visiting for work, watching my wife in lingerie kissing a man 10 years younger, acting like she belonged there. She did. I backed away, heart pounding so hard it was all I could hear. I made it back to the truck, closed the door, and just sat there. Hands gripping the wheel, trying not to lose it. That's when I remembered the backup. A week earlier, while I was processing all the warning signs, I had asked IT at my office to recover a corrupted backup folder from our shared cloud drive. I told them I was missing some archived conference call recordings. It wasn't a lie, just not the full truth. Among the files was a synced folder with Kelly's work voicemails. Most were auto-transcribed, but some had saved audio. She'd probably linked her work number to her cloud for convenience years ago and forgot all about it. I hadn't listened to them yet. Until now. I opened my phone, pulled up the drive, and hit play on the most recent one. Hey, it's me, her voice whispered softer than I'd heard it in months. Just wanted to say thanks for this weekend. I needed that more than I realized. It felt real. Like I could breathe again. I wish I didn't have to go home tomorrow. Anyway. I'll see you soon. Next message. Friday works. I booked the room under your name this time, just in case. I don't want to take any chances. Same hotel as before. And yeah, I'll wear the one you like. I stopped the recording. Everything around me blurred. The dashboard. The houses. My own reflection in the windshield. It all faded into a dull, echoing noise. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I wasn't crying either. I wasn't anything. Just empty. I had held out hope that maybe I was wrong. That maybe all the signs were coincidence or bad timing or her going through something she didn't know how to talk about. But now? Now I knew. This wasn't a fling. This wasn't a single lapse in judgment. This was a parallel life. She had built it carefully. Maintained it with precision. Used company travel as cover. Kept details vague enough to evade suspicion but an asterisk made enough to matter. And she was good at it. I had to give her that. She had fooled me for months. But not anymore. When I got home later that night, I didn't say anything. I didn't bring it up. Didn't ask questions. She returned the next evening, kissed me like nothing had changed, and made small talk about road construction and bad hotel coffee. I nodded, smiled, played my part. But in my head, the switch had already flipped. And the version of me who still thought this marriage could be saved was gone. I didn't confront her. Not that night. Not the next morning. Not even the day after. It wasn't because I was afraid. I'd already seen everything I needed to see, her hands on him, the robe, the voicemail where she practically whispered her feelings into a digital confession box. I had proof in triplicate. This wasn't a question of truth anymore. It was just a matter of what to do with it. But the part of me that would have snapped, who would have demanded answers, screamed, begged, flipped the dining table and shouted, "How could you?" That part was just gone. Instead, I drove out to the edge of town and checked into a roadside motel. The kind of place with fluorescent lights that buzz like flies and walls so thin you can hear your neighbor's television even when it's muted. I didn't bring anything but my wallet and phone. I didn't tell anyone I was leaving. Not my parents. Not my coworkers. Not even my brother. I didn't leave a note. I just needed space. Not to think. Thinking was the problem. Thinking had me unraveling every hour of every day over the past year, wondering where I went wrong, when I stopped being enough, how she went from kissing me goodbye in the morning to kissing him goodnight. No. I didn't want to think. I wanted silence. And the motel gave me that. It was the kind of silence that filled the room like fog. Thick. Suffocating. But familiar. Almost comforting in how numb it made me. I lay on the bed, fully clothed, shoes still on, staring at the popcorn ceiling as if the cracks up there could rearrange themselves into an answer. They didn't. I didn't eat. Not for 2 days. The vending machine outside my room had stale chips and warm soda, but I couldn't even bring myself to press the buttons. Food felt irrelevant. Like it belonged to a life I didn't recognize anymore. Sleep didn't come either, not in the way I hoped. I'd doze off for 30 minutes only to wake up feeling like I'd just run a marathon in my head. Heart racing. Palms sweaty. Images flashing behind my eyes. Her in that window. That message on the voicemail. The sound of her voice saying I needed that more than I realized. Needed that. Not me. Not the man who helped pay her student loans or sat with her in the hospital while her father passed or held her hand through 2 miscarriages we never told anyone about. Not the man who showed up every damn day. Who gave her space when she needed it, comfort when she didn't ask, and loyalty even when I suspected I wasn't getting the same. No, that wasn't what she needed anymore. She needed him. A younger man with no past, no history, no baggage. Just a fresh canvas for her to paint whatever version of herself she wanted to be now. And maybe the worst part? I wasn't even surprised. That's the thing about betrayal. It rarely feels sudden when it hits. It feels overdue. Like you've been watching the ceiling leak for years and you're only shocked when it finally collapses. I spent most of the 3rd day just walking. Up and down the stretch of sidewalk outside the motel, past the truck stop, around the corner where a boarded-up diner sat collecting dust and graffiti. No destination. Just motion. I didn't want to be still. Stillness meant thinking, and thinking meant pain. I don't know how long I walked. Hours, maybe? At one point, I passed a family loading their luggage into a minivan, 2 kids laughing over something one of them spilled on a suitcase. Their mom yelled something playful and wiped the mess with a napkin from her purse. It was such a small, ordinary scene. But it hit me like a good punch. That used to be something I wanted. The kids. The luggage. The weekend trips. The messy kind of life where someone needed you every second of the day, and not because they pitied you or because you were convenient, but because you were home. And now? Now I was just a name on a marriage license with an expiration date nobody had bothered to stamp yet. When I got back to the motel, I sat in the dark for hours. Didn't turn the lights on. Didn't turn the TV on. I stared at the outline of my reflection in the window, watching how the outside world kept moving while I just didn't. The ache in my chest wasn't sharp. It was dull. Heavy. The kind that doesn't scream, it settles. Like sediment in a glass of dirty water. I kept wondering if I was supposed to be doing something. Was I supposed to fight? Yell? Try to win her back? But what was there to win? A woman who made reservations under another man's name? A woman who said, "I'll be back tomorrow evening," as casually as if she were picking up groceries? What would be the point of fighting for someone who had already decided I wasn't worth staying for? That night, I pulled up a blank note on my phone and wrote a single sentence. She left long before she packed her bags. I stared at that sentence for what felt like hours. It was the truest thing I had written in a long time. By morning, I made a decision. I wasn't going to blow up her life. I wasn't going to slash tires or post screech *TS or scream in the middle of our living room while she cried and said she was sorry. There was nothing left to ruin. The damage had already been done. Quietly. Efficiently. Like a controlled demolition. I didn't need revenge. I needed distance. I needed out. So I packed up my things, what little I had brought, and checked out of the motel. The receptionist didn't look up from her crossword puzzle as I slid the key across the counter. By noon, I was sitting in a parking lot outside a storage facility on the edge of town. A place I hadn't been to in years. We used to keep seasonal stuff there, holiday decorations, extra furniture, old photo albums. It was under both our names. But now? It was going to be mine. Because I wasn't going back to that house. Not as the man I used to be. And definitely not as her husband. I always thought the end of a marriage would come with a bang. A dramatic shouting match. Doors slamming. Clothes hurled down staircases. Voices cracking under the weight of betrayal. But my ending came with a spreadsheet. I opened my laptop at the corner table of a coffee shop on the outskirts of town, a place where nobody knew my name and the baristas didn't ask questions when I kept ordering black coffee every 90 minutes. I made a checklist, passwords, accounts, legal files, address change forms. A digital autopsy of a life built together. The first thing I did was open a new bank account. I transferred what I could, my direct deposits, savings I had from before the marriage, a few emergency funds I'd squirreled away over the years. I didn't drain everything. That would have been petty. But I took what was mine and I made sure she couldn't touch it. Next, I changed all the passwords, email, phone provider, streaming services, utilities, even that dumb grocery rewards login she insisted on using. Anything that linked us, anything joint, got locked down. I reset recovery emails, added two-factor authentication, scrubbed every connection. Then I redirected the mail. Simple form. Took 5 minutes. That night, a little card from the post office confirmed it. All my mail would now go to the private box I'd rented across town. A small metal drawer in a gray wall behind bulletproof glass. It didn't feel like freedom, but it felt like control. After that, I went through our joint subscriptions, music, cloud storage, shared calendars, and canceled my side of everyone. I deleted the shared grocery list app, closed our Spotify family plan, blocked her on the group budgeting platform. 1,000 small digital divorces before the real one even began. I thought I'd feel cruel doing it, but I didn't. I felt nothing. It was mechanical, purposeful, like sweeping broken glass into a dustpan. You don't cry over the shards. You just make sure they're gone so nobody steps on them barefoot in the middle of the night. When I was done with the accounts, I focused on logistics. The house, the bills, the lawyer. I didn't want a dramatic showdown in the living room. I didn't want her to cry and say things like, "We can fix this," or "It wasn't what it looked like," or "I was lost, but I never stopped loving you." I had read enough letters on her tablet to know exactly how she'd spin it. She was always better with words than she was with honesty. So I went behind the curtain first. I scheduled a consultation with an attorney, someone a friend from college recommended. A woman named Dana who specialized in high-discretion divorces and didn't ask more than she needed to. When we sat across from each other, I slid a folder across the desk. Photos, screensh *TS, audio transcripts, hotel records, messages I'd recovered from her phone backups. Enough to remove any doubt about who had betrayed whom. Dana flipped through the evidence silently, her reading glasses low on her nose. When she looked up, her expression didn't change. "Do you want to take her to court? Or do you want to be done?" "I want to be gone," I said. "Clean, quick, no noise." She nodded. Then we'll move quietly. You'll have the draft paperwork by Friday. You'll file Monday. By the time she sees it, you'll already be gone. That was the plan. Leave before she even realized the ground under her had been moved. Because for months, maybe even longer, she had been walking on the assumption that I was standing still, waiting, unaware, or too weak to act. She'd grown comfortable with the idea of me not knowing. What she didn't realize was that I wasn't playing catch-up anymore. I was already ahead, and I had no intention of leaving breadcrumbs behind. The next thing I did was rent a storage unit in my own name, one she didn't know existed. I went home that evening while she was at work and packed a dozen boxes. My clothes, my sketchbooks, my childhood photo albums, the leather jacket my dad gave me when I graduated college. Anything that felt like mine, anything that still carried a piece of who I was before we became everything. I packed it all into the back of my truck and drove it to the unit just before midnight. I labeled each box in permanent marker, not so I'd know what was inside, but to prove to myself that I'd already left. The next morning, I sat in our kitchen while she made her usual smoothie. She wore her robe and hummed to a song playing from her phone, something upbeat and meaningless. She looked at me and smiled like everything was normal, and in that moment, I realized she truly had no idea. No clue that the walls she'd built were already crumbling, that I'd stepped outside the frame of the life she was still pretending to live in. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. That afternoon, I installed a voice recorder under the driver's seat of her car. I know how that sounds, but I didn't want revenge. I wanted clarity. The first few recordings were boring commutes, phone calls with coworkers, one half-hearted podcast. But on Thursday evening, I heard her voice change. "Yeah, he's still clueless," she laughed. "I mean, I could probably bring Devin into the house at this point and he wouldn't blink. He's been so quiet lately. It's actually kind of nice." There was a pause. Then her voice dropped lower. "Anyway, it's not like he's ever gonna do anything. Logan's safe. Predictable." I stopped the audio there. I didn't need to hear more, because in that sentence, she'd summed up everything she believed about me. That I was passive. That I would never confront her. That I was easy to lie to. What she didn't know, the paperwork had already been filed that morning. And by the time she sat at the kitchen table again, sipping from that same smoothie glass, I'd already rewritten the next chapter of my life, without her in it. No screaming, no threats, no theatrics, just the quiet removal of everything I once built with her. Clean, final, and irreversible.